Everyone thinks Cain snapped because of Abel, but his rage started way earlier. And this is where the story stops being simple. Most people repeat the same 5-item summary. 2 brothers, 2 offerings, 1 accepted, 1 rejected, 1 disaster in a field clean. Concise, completely misleading. Because summaries are great for textbooks, but terrible for understanding people, especially people who carry things quietly. And Cain doesn't enter the story as a villain. There's no dramatic music, no suspicious shadows, no "he looked troubled since childhood" narration. He appears like someone normal, someone doing his work, living his routine, holding feelings nobody around him recognizes, which already makes the story more relatable than dramatic. And here comes the modern comparison no one likes to admit. It's like saying a fight happened because the coffee got cold, and ignoring the 6 months of stress, silence, and tiny irritations that came before it. The coffee wasn't the problem. It was just the final straw with better lighting. That's exactly the energy of the early Genesis narrative. People assume Abel is the cause of Cain's emotions, but the beginning of this story has nothing to do with Abel at all. Abel isn't competing, Abel isn't provoking. Abel isn't even paying attention to this dynamic, he's just existing. Meanwhile, under the surface, a different story is forming, the kind built slowly, quietly, through tiny internal comparisons no one else ever sees. Cain is measuring himself against expectations no one expressed, standards no one declared, pressoins que ninguém percebeu. And that's where things begin, not with rivalry, but with a silent script already written long before the offering moment. The version everyone knows jumps straight to the altar scene because it's dramatic. It has contrast, tension, a decision, a consequence, but drama is often the result, not the origin. And in Cain's case, the origin is a long, invisible build-up that never gets mentioned because it's not flashy enough for a Sunday school illustration. Still, that's the real beginning. The quiet part where identity, insecurity, and comparison start whispering long before the plot kicks in. By the time the offering arrives, the story isn't starting. It's revealing. And the audience doesn't realize that the emotional dominoes were arranged way before anyone placed a sacrifice on the ground. The real beginning has nothing to do with Abel. Before any offering appeared on the scene, something else was already happening, quietly, steadily under the surface where no one bothers to look. Long before Cain ever placed anything on the ground, there was expectation. Not the loud kind that comes with speeches and family announcements, but the subtle kind that hangs in the air and convinces someone they should be more without telling them what more even means. There was silent comparison too, the kind that doesn't involve charts or scoreboards, but somehow still keeps track of everything. Abel wasn't competing, but that didn't stop Cain from feeling like he was behind in a race no one officially started. And that's the annoying thing about silent comparison. It doesn't need an opponent to exist. It just needs imagination and a bit of insecurity to keep it fed. Internal pressure, that was there as well. The invisible kind, the "I should be doing better" energy that shows up uninvited and stays rent-free indefinitely. Along with it came something even more familiar, the quiet sense of inadequacy, a feeling that grows not because someone said anything, but because no one did. A whole narrative was already being built inside Cain long before the offering day, a storyline forming brick by brick, expectations he created, assumptions he believed, and standards he invented. Nothing explodes out of nowhere. It only looks sudden to the people who weren't paying attention, and this is where humor gets a little too honest. Because jealousy rarely enters the chat without a long pre-conversation. It's true. Jealousy doesn't knock on the door and say, "Hi, I'm here." It slowly loads in the background like an old computer program you forgot you opened. The modern equivalent? It's like living in someone's shadow even though that person isn't trying to cast one. They're just walking, and you're the one positioning yourself slightly behind them, measuring the distance, adjusting your steps to match theirs, even though no one asked you to. The problem isn't Abel. It's what Cain thinks about himself. That's the uncomfortable truth people skip when summarizing the story. They jump to the offering scene as if it magically invented all the tension. But the offering is just the first visible chapter of a much longer emotional prequel most readers ignore. Cain's pressure was internal, not external. His comparison was imagined, not imposed. His insecurity grew quietly, not publicly. And because no one saw it forming, everyone assumes the offering moment created the issue. It didn't. It simply revealed what was already boiling. And the offering moment only reveals what was already boiling. When the offering scene finally arrives, nothing dramatic happens on the outside. 2 gifts, 2 intentions, 2 simple actions. But inside Cain, that scene isn't a beginning. It's a trigger. Because the offering doesn't create his anger. It simply activates what was already there. And what was already there? Perceived rejection. The kind that hits harder when someone already believes they're not enough. Amplified comparison. Suddenly everything looks like a scoreboard, even if no one else is watching. Shattered self-esteem. Not because the offering failed, but because the failure seems personal. An internal narrative of defeat. The quiet script that whispers, "See, this confirms it." All of that existed long before anything touched the altar. From the outside, it looks like one moment changed everything. But that's never how emotional explosions work. A single spark only matters if the room was already full of fumes. And Cain had been collecting fumes for a long time. There's an observational truth everyone understands but rarely admits. When a heart is already full, it only takes one detail to overflow. And here's the part that makes the story uncomfortable. Abel doesn't provoke anything. He doesn't challenge Cain. He doesn't compete. He doesn't do a victory dance or make a passive-aggressive comment. He's just there. That's why this moment stings. The conflict isn't external, it's internal. Cain isn't reacting to Abel. He's reacting to the version of himself he fears might be true. Modern equivalent? It's like blaming a co-worker for getting praised by the boss, even though the co-worker didn't do anything against you. They weren't plotting. They weren't competing. They weren't even aware your emotional volcano was 3 minutes from eruption. They just did their job, and the compliment floated in their direction by pure coincidence. But insecurity doesn't care about coincidence. To someone already battling comparison, the compliment doesn't feel neutral. It feels like a personal attack from the universe, and that's the shift happening here. This story is leaving the territory of sibling rivalry and entering the territory of identity, the deep, invisible kind no one sees until it bursts into the open. The offering is not the villain of the story. Neither is Abel. Neither is the moment. The real force is the quiet wound that finally gets touched and reacts louder than anyone expected. And just like that. And this is where the story shifts from sibling rivalry to identity crisis. The tragedy doesn't begin in the field. Everyone assumes it does because that's where the action happens. The part people turn into illustrations and moral lessons. But the real starting point is quieter, almost invisible. It begins in silence. There is the silence of dialogue, the kind where words should have been spoken but weren't. The kind where a conversation could have dissolved resentment, but resentment was allowed to stay and renovate the place instead. There is the silence of recognition, when someone needs to be seen but no one notices. Not because they don't care, but because they assume everything is fine. People are surprisingly good at misreading quiet. There is the silence of one's own pain, the dangerous kind, the I'll deal with it later kind, the this isn't a big deal kind that ages like spoiled milk. Pain ignored doesn't disappear, it multiplies. And then there is the silence where everything gets worse, the space where emotions go to ferment. Nothing explodes instantly. It brews, slowly, patiently, secretly. That's where the story of Cain really builds its momentum. Not in the field, but in the long, unspoken heaviness that preceded it. By the time his final action arrives, it isn't a surprise, it's a consequence. And here's the part that lands like a punchline from a very ancient, very honest narrator. Cain didn't attack a brother. He attacked a reflection of what he feared he wasn't. That's the uncomfortable twist. He isn't running from Abel. He's running from insecurity, wearing Abel as a silhouette. So when the confrontation happens afterward, when God asks where his brother is, Cain doesn't try to hide the act. He tries to hide the responsibility. Because facing what he did is one thing, facing why he did it is another. Avoidance becomes the real antagonist in this moment. Modern equivalent? It's like trying to put out a fire by hiding the fire extinguisher behind your back and hoping no one notices the flames. You're not solving anything. You're just pretending the problem will stop being a problem if you don't look at it directly. And yet, this is what makes the story timeless. People think it's about violence, jealousy, rivalry, or punishment, but the deeper theme is far more familiar and far more human. It's avoidance, the silent habit of running from the truth because the truth feels bigger than the mistake. And that's why the final line lands so cleanly. And the real message isn't about violence, but about avoidance. Cain's rage didn't start with Abel. It started with insecurity, comparison, and silence. That's the real answer to the title, and the part most versions skip. People love dramatic scenes because they're easy to retell. But what shaped this story wasn't a moment. It was a build-up. Before the offering there was pain, small, quiet, internal. The kind that doesn't get narrated because it isn't cinematic enough. But it was there first, sitting in the background, long before anything touched an altar. Before the crisis there was comparison, slow, subtle, unspoken. No rivalry, no competition, no contest. Just that familiar human instinct to measure worth without knowing where the measuring tape came from. Before the action there was emotion, strong, complicated, compacted over time, a feeling growing in silence, unnoticed, unaddressed, shaping everything from the shadows. And before responsibility ever entered the story, there was avoidance, the oldest instinct of all. The idea that if you look away from a problem long enough, maybe it'll stop existing. Spoiler, it doesn't. The modern summary is simple. The pain before the offering, the comparison before the crisis, the feeling before the action, the escape before the accountability. That's the real anatomy of this narrative. Because this episode was never about a rival. It was never about a brother. And it was definitely never about a single rejected offering. The core of the story is far more human and far more uncomfortable. It's about an inner battle left unchecked until it became destructive. The kind of battle people still fight today, not against others, but against stories they build about themselves. Stories that grow in silence, distort reality, and eventually shape choices that seem sudden to everyone else. There's a modern comparison for this too, one that fits almost too well. Most dangerous fights don't begin with someone else. They begin with the stories we tell ourselves. That's what makes the story timeless. Not the field, not the offering, not the aftermath. The real beginning wasn't an event. It was a heart trying to navigate insecurity without naming it. A heart that misread its own value. A heart that turned silence into a narrative instead of a conversation. And that's why the final line lands so cleanly, almost like the narrator has been waiting the whole episode to say it. The real beginning wasn't the field, it was the heart. And now the story closes with a simple, natural question. The same one the audience always loves at the end of an oversimplified style episode. Which misunderstood biblical story should I simplify next? Noah, Abraham, Esau,